A warm Saturday afternoon fills the local animal shelter with energy, laughter, barking, excited chatter. Families weave through aisles of kennels, stopping to pet golden retrievers, toss treats to playful lab mixes, or coo over wiggly puppies. But in the far corner, behind a chain-link door marked "Do Not Tap Glass," a lone German shepherd sits motionless. He's not aggressive. Not scared. Just quiet. Watching. A young boy approaches but quickly turns away when the dog doesn't move. Parents pass his kennel without pausing. A couple peeks in, only to frown and move on. The shelter is buzzing, except around him. Two teenage volunteers lean against the wall nearby. "That one again?" one whispers. "Yeah. Third time this month," the other replies. People adopt him, then return him. Says he doesn't listen. Doesn't connect. "But he's not mean," the first says, frowning. "Nope," says the other. "Just intense. Like he knows something." The shelter manager walks over, clipboard in hand, and pauses at the shepherd's kennel. She crouches down, speaking quietly. "Nobody ever gets past his eyes," she mutters. "Or that tag." She reaches through the bars, gently flipping the worn leather collar. The tag is metal, scratched and old, but still readable. "If found, bring me home. I know the way." There's no name. No address. Just that single, strange sentence. The dog doesn't react to her voice. Don't bark. Don't beg. He just watches. The manager sighs and stands up. It's like he's not looking for a family. Like he's waiting for someone. Back in his kennel, the German shepherd lies down slowly, resting his head on his paws. All around him, doors open. Dogs leave with smiling children. Cages empty. But he remains closed. Unchosen. Again. And yet, he waits. Not for treats. Not for toys. For something else. Someone else. And the moment they read that tag, everything will change. A cold wind brushes past Matthew King as he exits his truck and stares at the shelter's entrance. He's 42, strong-framed but weathered, like someone who's been through a fire and never fully stepped out of the smoke. His eyes are tired, ringed with sleepless nights and silent grief. A firefighter for nearly 2 decades, Matthew once ran into burning buildings without hesitation. Now, he hesitates just to answer the phone. It's been 2 years since the accident that took his wife, Olivia. Since then, he's lived in silence, just the creak of floorboards and the hum of an old fridge filling the void. He doesn't want a dog. He doesn't want anything, really. But his therapist's words echo in his mind: you don't need to fix everything right now. Just start with something that needs you to come home. So here he is. Inside the shelter, the noise hits him all at once: barking, kids giggling, metal bowls clanking against concrete. He walks slowly down the aisle, nodding politely at a volunteer offering to help. Puppies bounce against the glass. One golden retriever nearly jumps into his arms. A young boxer licks the air in his direction. They're all eager. Loud. Alive. Too alive. He keeps walking. Toward the back, where it's quiet. That's when he sees him. A German shepherd. Sitting in the corner of his kennel like he's been waiting all day, or all his life. He doesn't bark. Doesn't move. Just watch. Matthew stops. Something about the dog's stillness matches his own. Like they've both seen something they can't explain, and they don't need to. He reads the tag on the collar hanging from the gate. If found, bring me home. I know the way. Matthew tilts his head. The tag isn't just a sentence. It's a whisper. A challenge. A message from something, or someone, who understands being lost. For the first time in a long time, Matthew exhales, not in pain, but in curiosity. And just like that, he makes a decision he doesn't fully understand yet. He turns to the volunteer and says, I'll take this one. Have you ever felt a connection you couldn't explain? The kind that stops you in your tracks, no words, no reason, just a feeling deep in your chest that says this means something? Maybe it was a look, a gesture, or a pair of eyes staring back at you, like they already knew your story. Drop a paw prints in the comments if you believe animals carry messages, signs, warnings, or maybe even healing. Because what you're about to witness isn't just a story about a dog. It's about a man who had given up on himself. And a dog no one wanted, until someone finally read the tag on his collar. Stay with us. Because the moment they met, something shifted. And what unfolded after that might just change how you see loyalty, love, and fate forever. Matthew King had no plans to adopt a dog that day. He'd driven past the shelter twice already. Parked. Left. Parked again. It wasn't the barking or the smell of bleach that made his hands tremble, it was the idea of needing anything at all. But something in him, maybe the silence at home, maybe the echo of his late wife's voice, finally pushed him inside. He walked the rows quietly. Golden retrievers wagged. Poodles danced on two legs. Puppies licked the bars of their pens. He smiled politely, nodded when a volunteer asked if he needed help. But nothing pulled at him. Until the very last kennel. A large German shepherd sat perfectly still. Not pacing. Not barking. Just watching. Their eyes met. Matthew felt something stir. This wasn't the friendly bounce of a dog eager for attention. This was different. He stepped closer. The dog's collar tag hung crookedly from years of wear. Matthew leaned in to read it. If found, bring me home. I know the way. He blinked. Read it again. What kind of tag is that? He whispered to himself. The volunteer behind him lowered her voice. That's Thor. Been returned 3 times. Families say he just wanders. Like he's looking for something. Matthew didn't speak. His fingers tightened on the chain-link gate. That phrase on the tag, it hit something deep. Bring me home. I know the way. The same words his wife had whispered when she was fading. About the house. About the place she wanted to be laid to rest. He didn't believe in signs. But Thor hadn't moved. Just stared at him, eyes sharp, calm, like he'd been waiting. Can I take him out? Matthew finally asked. The volunteer nodded slowly, unlocking the latch. As the gate swung open, Thor didn't jump or bark. He simply walked forward and placed his head gently against Matthew's leg. And just like that, Matthew couldn't move. Something had just changed. He couldn't explain it. But he didn't need to. Matthew didn't even fill out the adoption forms with full conviction. It felt surreal, signing papers for a dog he'd met minutes ago, but something in his gut wouldn't let him walk away. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting absently on the shepherd's backseat crate. The dog, Thor, stayed calm. Silent. Not a whimper or bark, just alert eyes scanning the road like he was cataloging every landmark. About 5 minutes into the drive, Thor stood. He leaned hard against the crate bars, letting out a quiet whine. His eyes locked on the window. They were passing a nondescript intersection, Maple and Grove. Matthew noticed but kept driving. Thor barked once. Then again. His paw scratched at the side of the crate, insistent but not panicked. Like he was saying, turn there. Matthew frowned. Easy, buddy. We're going home. But 2 blocks later, the dog whined louder. His body shifted again when they passed another street, Grove looping toward an older part of town. Matthew glanced at the rearview mirror. Thor's eyes were locked on the road behind them. He turned the music down. Rolled down the window. Something about that bark, it didn't feel random. At the next light, he sighed. All right, let's see what's got your tail in a twist. He made a U-turn and drove slowly back toward the intersection. The moment the car approached the earlier street, Thor's body relaxed. He sat back down. No barking. No whining. Just, calm. Matthew slowed the car. Okay. Now I'm listening. Matthew pulled over near the edge of Grove Street, uncertain. Thor sat up again, ears perked. No barking this time, just a steady, intense stare through the windshield. What is it? Matthew murmured, more to himself than the dog. Thor's nose pressed against the passenger side window, fogging it briefly. Following the dog's lead, Matthew stepped out and unlatched the crate. Thor leapt down gracefully, nose to the ground, tail low but moving. He walked, not ran, down the cracked sidewalk, turning confidently into an overgrown lot partially fenced with rusted wire. Then Matthew saw it. A scorched, collapsed frame of a house sat sunken into the earth like a forgotten tomb. Windows blew out. Shingles blackened. Weeds grown over what once was a driveway. His breath caught. He knew this place. Flashback, 7 years ago. Rain pelted his helmet. Smoke poured from the attic vents. Matthew had fought the blaze with every ounce of strength he had. But the inferno had moved fast, too fast. The family barely made it out. Except for their little girl. She was trapped in her upstairs room. Matthew had tried. He got within 20 feet before a backdraft slammed him against the stairs, knocking the wind and hope out of him. He never forgot her name. Lily. He still had nightmares of her face in the window. Back in the present, Matthew stood frozen. Thor sat down beside him, as if honoring the space. How did you know? Matthew whispered. He walked cautiously toward the remains. Charwood snapped beneath his boots. It felt like trespassing on sacred ground. Thor nudged a particular spot beneath the old porch beams. Matthew crouched, brushing aside dirt and ash. There, beneath a half-burnt floorboard, was something odd, clean, almost untouched. A child's necklace. He recognized it immediately. A tiny silver heart with a purple gem in the middle. The same one Lily's father had described in tears the night she died. Matthew sank to his knees, holding it gently in his palm. His vision blurred with tears. Thor sat quietly beside him, unmoving. Watching. Somehow, the dog had brought him full circle. Back to the place where guilt had buried him. Back to the fire he never put out. Matthew sat on the crumbling porch steps, the scorched necklace in his hand, barely able to breathe. The weight of the years, the guilt, the failure, the questions that never got answered, came crashing down like a second fire he couldn't outrun. His fingers tightened around the necklace. Tears spilled freely now. He whispered, I failed her. Thor, silent as ever, sat close. His presence was steady. Not asking for attention. Just being there. And then, like a floodgate cracking open, Matthew remembered something he'd buried for years. That night, through the flames, he'd heard barking. Not just the family's cries, but a faint, frantic yelp from inside the burning home. A puppy. He had charged in without thinking, face wrapped in a soaked cloth. He remembered scooping up the tiny bundle of fur, barely alive, shaking, and rushing it outside before going back in. That second trip was supposed to be for the girl. But he never made it. The floor had collapsed. The smoke was too thick. He passed out before reaching the staircase. The next day, his captain told him the girl didn't survive. The puppy? Taken in by animal control. Just a footnote in the report. He never thought about that pup again. Until now. Matthew turned and looked at Thor, really looked. The shepherd's eyes were calm, knowing. As if he remembered too. You were there, Matthew whispered. You were that puppy. Thor didn't react dramatically. Just gently laid his head on Matthew's knee, like he understood everything without needing words. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something else. A second chance. To make peace with the fire. To follow where the dog led. Matthew walked through the shelter doors with a strange mix of urgency and disbelief. Thor trotted quietly beside him, calm but alert. The same volunteers were on shift, chatting at the front desk. One of them looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're the guy who adopted Tag," she said warmly. "Tag?" Matthew asked, pausing. "Yeah, that's what we'd been calling him. Because of that weird collar." He pulled the collar out of his pocket, the one with the tag that read, "If found, bring me home." "I know the way." "That's why I'm here," Matthew said. "This tag, who logged it?" The volunteer frowned. She called over the manager, a middle-aged man with a clipboard and glasses. "I don't remember seeing that tag in the file," the manager said, taking it and squinting at the engraving. He typed something into the computer. Scanned. Waited. Then shook his head slowly. "This doesn't make sense. According to our records, this dog, Tag, was dropped off last year. No microchip. No collar. No owner. But this collar was on him," Matthew insisted. "I believe you," the manager said cautiously, "but it's not in our logs. We check everything that comes in. If that tag had been on him, it should have been noted." Matthew's thoughts spun. "So, it just appeared?" "No," the manager replied, hesitating. "That's not possible." Matthew looked down at Thor. "But somehow it happened." Another volunteer chimed in, "I always thought he looked like he'd been through something. Way too calm, too wise, you know?" Matthew didn't answer. He stared at the computer screen showing a blank section where a history should have been. A dog with no past. A tag that nobody recorded. A memory of fire. And a path that led home. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. Matthew sat on the porch that evening, staring into the quiet. Thor, or Lucky, as the tag now suggested, rested by his feet, calm and ever watchful. The autumn wind rolled gently through the trees, and Matthew's fingers absently rubbed the edge of the collar still in his coat pocket. Something caught his nail. A flap in the collar's lining, slightly loose, slightly stiff. He pulled gently and felt the edge of a piece of paper. Folding it open slowly, he discovered a small, partially signed photo. A girl, no older than 8, hugging a German Shepherd puppy with bright eyes. Behind them, a white picket fence and a backyard treehouse. The photo was warm, joyful, and old. Charred slightly at the corners. Matthew turned it over. Faded handwriting in a child's blocky script read, "For Lucky. Always protect." His chest tightened. Lucky. So this dog wasn't just a survivor of that fire, he had a name. A purpose. A bond. Matthew stared at the girl's face. She looked familiar. Something about the eyes, the curve of the smile. Then the memory hit like a freight train. He'd seen that face before. On a missing poster. On a wall of remembrance after the fire. She was the daughter, the one who had disappeared during the blaze. Everyone thought she hadn't made it. But there had never been a confirmed body, only ashes and assumptions. Matthew's hands shook. He looked down at Lucky, who met his eyes steadily, as if saying, "You were meant to find this. Did you try to save her?" Matthew whispered. Lucky blinked, then gently rested his head on Matthew's knee. Matthew knew now, this wasn't random. This dog had carried a secret for years. A photo. A name. A mission. And that mission wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning, Matthew sat at his old kitchen table, dusty binders and scanned reports spread across its surface. Years of archived fire department incident logs, he still had digital access from his time on the force. Lucky paced quietly nearby, occasionally glancing at the photo now pinned under a clear sleeve. Matthew searched the address of the house from the fire. Cross-referenced it with old reports, looking for victim statements, search efforts, anything that might explain what happened to the girl in the photo. There it was. Name, Emily Hargrove. Age, 9. Status, presumed deceased, remains not recovered. But something didn't sit right. In a supplemental report buried in the back, he found a handwritten note from the lead investigator. No sign of the child's body. Neighbor mentioned seeing a black sedan leaving the scene during the blaze, unconfirmed. A black sedan? He'd never read that detail before. Matthew dug deeper, finding police records, child welfare case notes. A whisper trail of references. Emily wasn't declared legally dead until 2 years later. No funeral, no body, just silence. And then, one last clue. A note on a welfare inquiry from 2016. Anonymous tip received claiming Emily H. was seen in a rural area outside Elwood County. Report closed due to lack of evidence. Matthew leaned back in his chair, stunned. She didn't die. She vanished. And no one kept looking. Lucky, no, Emily's dog, had carried this truth for years. And now he had brought Matthew into it. This wasn't just about guilt anymore. It was about redemption. She's out there, Matthew said quietly, gripping the photo. Lucky lifted his head. The hunt was on. Matthew drove down the narrow, cracked street that bordered the old burned house. It looked even more forgotten now, nature taking over with vines clawing up the fence and moss covering what used to be the porch. But he wasn't there for the ruins, he was headed next door. An elderly woman peeked through the blinds before finally cracking the door. Her name was Mrs. Delaney, quiet, lived alone, barely seen around town. I was there the night it happened, she admitted softly, eyes darting nervously. Matthew leaned in. Did you see anything? She hesitated, then nodded. I saw someone take her. A man in dark clothes. Masked. He had gloves, he put her in a black SUV. Quietly. She wasn't screaming. Looked drugged, maybe. Matthew froze. Why didn't you tell the police? I tried, but they said the fire explained everything. And after that, people told me to stop asking questions. So I stayed quiet. Tears filled her eyes. I've lived with that guilt for over a decade. Matthew clenched his jaw. This wasn't just an accident, it was a cover-up. And now, thanks to Lucky, he finally had someone who could point them in the right direction. The girl didn't disappear. She was taken. Back at home, Matthew sat in front of his laptop, Lucky lying quietly at his feet. He couldn't shake the neighbor's story. It didn't sit right, and something told him this wasn't an isolated tragedy. He began searching news archives, narrowing his search to house fires involving children over the last 15 years. The more he read, the more his gut twisted. Case after case. Each one is eerily similar. A house fire was deemed accidental. A child reported dead, or sometimes missing. And in the fine print, something else caught his eye every time. A stray dog was found nearby. Unidentified canine recovered from scene. Local authorities captured a wandering dog near the home. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Different towns. Different states. Always a child. Always a fire. Always a dog, never claimed, never explained. He opened a folder and began printing each article. One after the other. Until the floor around him was covered with paper and ink. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a trail. Lucky stirred and looked up at him, as if sensing the shift in the air. As if he already knew. Matthew whispered, "How many, buddy?" He stared at the wall of clippings, the edges curling like the scorched corners of memories. These weren't random tragedies. They were part of something bigger, something someone worked hard to bury. And now, Matthew was digging them up. One fire at a time. Lucky's behavior changed on a Tuesday night. At exactly 9:04 p.m., while Matthew sipped tea in the quiet of his living room, Lucky stiffened. His ears shot up, nose twitching, body on full alert. Then came a low growl, deep, restrained, but unmistakably serious. He walked to the window and let out one sharp bark. Matthew glanced outside. A black van sat across the street, tucked under the shadow of a maple tree. No logos. Tinted windows. The kind of vehicle you overlook, unless something, or someone, calls attention to it. The next night, it returned. Same time. Same spot. Same reaction from Lucky, only louder. By the third night, Matthew was starting to feel the same chill he'd felt the day he read the dog's tag. He stepped outside with Lucky on the fourth night. As they approached the curb, the van suddenly pulled away, tires crunching softly over gravel. Lucky barked once. A deliberate sound. Focused. Like he was identifying something only he could truly understand. Matthew stared after the van, unease curling in his gut. Something was off. And Lucky, who had survived fire, loss, and a forgotten past, wasn't just reacting. He was remembering. Matthew whispered, "Is that the one?" Lucky didn't flinch. He simply sat beside Matthew, eyes locked on the road, silent now, but braced. As if he knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Matthew couldn't shake the feeling. The black van wasn't just a coincidence, it was a clue. That night, after Lucky barked again at exactly 9:04 p.m., Matthew took action. He visited a nearby electronics store the next morning and bought a high-resolution night vision camera with motion detection. When he returned home, he installed it discreetly behind the upstairs curtain, aiming it directly at the spot where the van always parked. That evening, he waited. Lucky paced near the window as if confirming the setup. At 9:03 p.m., the van arrived, right on schedule. The camera blinks red, quietly recording. In the morning, Matthew reviewed the footage. The van had paused longer than usual this time. A figure sat motionless behind the wheel, never exiting. Then came the detail Matthew had hoped for. The camera had captured the license plate, partially obscured by grime, but readable. Matthew immediately ran the plate through an online database. What came up startled him. The van was registered to a man named Ronald Greer, age 58. No known current employment. But years ago, he'd been questioned, not charged, in a string of arson investigations. Fires involving child disappearances. Closed cases. Cold trails. Matthew printed everything, plate number, surveillance image, Greer's address, and brought it to the police. The officer at the desk raised his eyebrows but promised to pass it to detectives. Still, Matthew couldn't help but feel nervous. He'd taken a step too few had dared. Lucky sat beside him in the car, alert. Quiet. Watching. And waiting. 2 days later, Matthew received a call that made his heart pound. It was from Special Agent Rivera with the FBI. "Mr. King," she said. "We've reviewed the footage you submitted. That van belongs to Ronald Greer. He's been on our radar for years. You may have just cracked a major case." Matthew barely whispered, "It was the dog who led me." That same night, unmarked cars rolled into the neighborhood. The FBI coordinated with local police to raid Greer's home in the early morning hours. Matthew watched from his front window as armed agents surrounded the house. Greer didn't resist. But what they found inside chilled everyone to the bone: maps, surveillance photos, children's belongings, even burned documents linked to multiple house fires over the last decade. Each fire had been officially closed. Each one involved a missing child. And each one, curiously, had an unclaimed dog found near the scene. The pattern was undeniable. The agents were stunned when Matthew showed them the photo he found under Lucky's collar, especially after confirming that the girl in the image had been declared missing since the fire over 10 years ago. "Your dog didn't just survive," Agent Rivera told Matthew. "He saved her. And now, with your help, he helped bring the man responsible to justice." The media quickly picked up the story. But Matthew wasn't thinking about headlines. He knelt beside Lucky, scratched his neck, and whispered, "You knew all along." Lucky leaned his head into Matthew's chest, eyes soft, calm, like the storm had finally passed. The door to the quiet rehabilitation center opened slowly, and a young woman stepped into the hallway, cautious, curious, her expression guarded. 19 now, she moved like someone who'd spent years protecting herself from the world. Her name was Emily Cross. Matthew stood nearby with Lucky beside him, sitting alert but still. As Emily approached, Lucky suddenly whined, a high-pitched, trembling sound filled with familiarity. Then he rose and stepped forward, tail swaying gently, eyes locked on hers. Emily froze. Then, her voice cracked, "Lucky?" Tears filled her eyes. She dropped to her knees. Lucky rushed into her arms. For the first time in years, Emily wept freely, not from fear, but from relief. "He never left me, did he?" she whispered, pressing her face into his thick fur. Matthew turned away, overwhelmed. He had no words for what he just witnessed, this quiet miracle. Lucky had not only remembered. He had never stopped searching. A counselor came forward, tears in her own eyes. She never talked about that night. Never. But she kept drawing the same dog, over and over. We didn't understand. Until now. Matthew sat across from Emily later that day. She told him everything she remembered. The fire. The man in the mask. Hiding in the woods for hours with Lucky before she was taken. And how the dog had tried to protect her, biting, barking, refusing to leave her side. Even when she was eventually rescued and placed in care, Lucky was gone. Taken to a shelter. Lost in the shuffle. But not forgotten. Now, he is back. And the circle had closed. Matthew gently placed the signed photo on the table. Emily touched it, smiled softly. "He kept it?" "He protected it," Matthew said. "Just like he protected you." It was closure, not just for Emily, but for everyone who had almost given up hope. The therapy room felt different this time. Not colder or softer, just lighter. Matthew sat in his usual chair, but his posture was new. Shoulders less heavy. Face more open. He looked out the window for a second before turning back to the therapist, who waited patiently across from him. "I didn't come here to talk about pain today," Matthew said, voice steady. "I came to say thank you for pushing me to adopt a dog." The therapist smiled gently, sensing the change. Matthew chuckled under his breath. "You know what Lucky did? He didn't just sit with me in silence. He pulled me back into something I thought I'd lost forever." He paused. Purpose. Later that evening, at home, Matthew sat on the porch with Lucky lying by his feet. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the yard. He reached down and scratched Lucky's ears. "You didn't just come home," Matthew whispered. "You brought me back too." Lucky turned his head slightly, eyes glowing in the light, then rested his head on Matthew's boot. And in that simple moment, no headlines, no medals, just the quiet hum of a man and his dog, healing finally took hold. Word spread quickly. Within a day, local news outlets were buzzing with headlines like "Rescue Dog Exposes Truth Behind Years of Fires and Missing Children." The story of Lucky, the quiet, overlooked German Shepherd, was suddenly on everyone's lips. The town organized a small public ceremony in the square. Parents, children, firefighters, and teachers gathered. Kids made posters with paw prints and slogans like "Lucky the Hero" and "Silent Paws, Loud Bravery." Some wore tiny firefighter hats. Others brought treats. The mayor, visibly emotional, knelt and clipped a custom medal to Lucky's collar. "For bravery beyond words," she said. "And for reminding us to listen, even when the voice is silent." People stood in line to pet him. Adults who once passed him at the shelter. Teens who heard the story and came to see the hero in real life. Lucky sat calmly, tail thumping, eyes focused, just as loyal as the day he was adopted. By the end of the week, the shelter put up a new sign: "All dogs adopted." Thank you, community. The town had changed. Not just because of what Lucky uncovered, but because of what he represented: second chances, unseen loyalty, and the idea that sometimes, the right soul just needs someone to believe in them. And Lucky? He didn't seem surprised. He'd always known where he belonged. Voiceover. Sometimes, a soul finds its way back home through fur and memory. Not every hero wears a cape. Some walk on four legs, carrying more loyalty in their eyes than most do in a lifetime. Lucky wasn't just a dog. He was a witness, a survivor, and a guide. And in finding his way home, he helped bring others back too. Matthew's voice comes in, soft but sure. He didn't just save her. He saved me. And he never even asked for thanks. The camera slowly pans out, Lucky resting peacefully by the fireplace, his tag catching the light. A quiet reminder that some connections can't be explained, only felt. Then a final line appears on screen. Some dogs are found. Others find us. Call to action. If Lucky's story moved you, don't forget to like this video, drop a paw prints in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories that remind us of the power of loyalty, memory, and second chances. Because you never know, what you rescue might end up rescuing you. A week after the town ceremony, Matthew sorts through his mail, bills, flyers, and then, something odd. A plain white envelope. No return address. But in delicate handwriting across the front, it reads, "To Lucky." Matthew freezes. Lucky lifts his head from the rug, ears perked. As Matthew opens the envelope, a photo slips out, another child, maybe 8 years old, with soft curls and wide eyes. Clipped to the photo is a newspaper article, "Local girl disappears after house fire, no leads." Matthew reads the short, chilling note inside. It's happening again. He found his family once, can he do it again? No name. No contact. Just an address written at the bottom, half smudged, but still legible. A sinking feeling fills Matthew's chest. He looks at Lucky, who's already standing, tail stiff, eyes locked on the door. Almost as if he already knows. The final frame fades to black as a low voiceover echoes. Some heroes never stop searching. End line. He found his family once, can he do it again?